Hi, everybody. This is Joe Lample, the Joe behind Joe Gardener, and welcome to the Joe Gardener Show. Today, I am speaking with Basil Camu, who we had on the podcast just last week, but for a different topic. This is an encore presentation from our audio archives, but it's the first time here as video. So let me give you a quick introduction to set up today's conversation. Basil Camu is the co-founder of an incredible tree care company called Leaf and Limb. It's based in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's a master certified arborist with a wealth of knowledge, the author of a great book. Its title is From Wasteland to Wonder, and we'll be talking about that more today. But I wanted to spend the main part of our time today ahead of the upcoming season when snow and ice from winter weather leads to the risk of tree damage. And it's also the best time to maintain a tree for structural pruning or care of that tree. It's a great conversation with lots of good takeaway information. So that's what I have in store for you today, a proactive topic. And if you love trees or want to care for them properly, or at a minimum, reduce the risk of damage or danger of a tree on your property, this conversation is for you. And I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you on the other side for a wrap up. Basil, I'm so glad that you're back. My first conversation with you, which was just the last conversation that we've had, so this is only number 2, it was fascinating. And I've listened to you on other podcasts since, and you're so impressive every time you're in a conversation with anyone. Your knowledge, your ability to articulate your thoughts so clearly and succinctly. I'm impressed. And so I'm honored that you're back. And thank you for reaching out to have this conversation today.
Well, the honor is definitely mine. I really appreciate you having me, and thank you for your kind words.
You're welcome. So here we are, as I'm having this conversation with you, it's early January, and Atlanta, which is where I'm at, just got its second snowfall in 10 years, measurable snowfall. I
It's
mean,
crazy.
it's crazy. We used to get, 1 or 2 snows a year of enough to go out and play in it and all that, but never that much.
Yeah.
And the last one we got was literally about 10 years ago. And since then, we never even had a threat or a mention in the local weather that there might be snow. And then, in the past few days, word was getting out that it looked like it was going to happen, and it did, and it has. And we have it, and it's coming your way.
Yeah.
And I hope for you that it's not a big deal unless you want it to be, but
Yeah.
it has consequences too.
It's supposed to start here in just a few hours. Mostly worried about the roads, but as long as I can
Yeah.
get home, then I'll be fine.
Okay. Well, then let's keep this tight and
Oh, no, no, no.
right
Let's
down
not.
to right down to business.
No way. I mean, more just the idea that I love snow. I just don't like driving on it.
I
It's
hear
just
you.
such a scary thing.
Kind of the worst part. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but to my point, so here we are in the early part of the year when it is snowing and it's icing, and your work, you as a master arborist, trees, and you've been around a long time through all the seasons.
Yeah.
So the good and the bad of, the winter time for trees. And we have both. I mean, there's an opportunity here for structural pruning, and when the trees are dormant and the deciduous trees have lost their leaves, you really get to see a lot of that structure that you can't
Yeah.
see when it's fully leaked out. Yet at the same time, when we get the ice and the snow loads, that creates its own problem. So what I'd love to maybe start with for you is to let's go in both of those directions. The reason why the wintertime when the trees have lost their leaves can be a very good time for professionals such as yourself and your company, or if there's a DIYer out there that can safely do some of this maintenance themselves at this time of year. What
Yeah.
are those tasks? So with
Yeah.
that, I think you got the picture of where I want to go with that. Let's turn you loose on it.
Absolutely. And you raised such a great point about the ice. The ice is going to I mean, theoretically, we're going to have some ice here soon. And I'm sure many folks in the Northeast, this is a regular thing.
Yeah.
So those trees are going to have a heavy load on them, which means branches need to be, a traditional tree will have a large trunk with smaller, well-spaced branches. That's how you'd find these trees growing in the forest. But in the urban setting, often they're getting a lot of sunlight, probably more than would be natural in the forest. So they'll grow these very large limbs out to the side. Sometimes those limbs might actually be as big as the trunk or even bigger. And when you have these large limbs and they're growing in ways they shouldn't, this is where a little bit of extra load could be a really bad thing.
Mhm.
The limb might split, it might fall in a car or whatever, but worse yet, it's going to create this injury in the trunk. And it's going to be a big injury, one that the tree might not be able to recover from. So I think the idea of structural pruning is a way that we can give our trees extra life, but we can also protect our assets, our yard, our house, etc. The best time to do this sort of pruning is in the winter because it's a time when plants are not as active. So the flow of sap and nutrients, etc., is just it's a dull roar compared to the growing season. So
Mm,
in general, those pruning cuts that we would make induce just a bit less stress to the tree, which is a good thing.
yeah. Yes. And Basil, can I just back up for 1 second? Because you
Sure.
said something that you don't give a second thought to, but people that just heard what you said might go, well, why is that? And what I'm referring to was you said in an urban setting, oftentimes it's a sunnier situation. So the tree is putting out more side branches
Right.
versus a forested area where the tree is probably the trunk is growing taller and there's less outward growth. Can
Yeah.
you explain why that happens that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole idea is that trees are light eaters. I mean, this is their food, so they grow towards their food source. So if there's a bunch of light pouring in from the side where there would have normally been other trees fighting for that light, well, the tree will react by putting out lots of new growth in that direction so that it can collect more food.
Mm.
Food is what it needs to thrive and be healthy and protect itself, just like we humans.
Versus, if the tree is surrounded by other trees of equal height, they are all reaching for the light because they still need it, but they just have to go up to get it versus growing out.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so now we're back into the urban situation. We've got all these branches. Some are over our roofs of our houses and our cars,
Yeah.
and it's wintertime. So
Yep.
is that a big part of your business? Are people proactively say calling you guys and say, "Hey, I want to have my trees looked at now this time of year because I realize it's a good time"?
People in the know, probably
Yeah.
much of your listener audience and people who are sort of gaining interest in their trees, this becomes a thing that they think about and
Yeah.
invest in.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who just don't know that this is an important thing to care for your tree. So it is a big time for pruning in general,
Yeah.
but there's definitely more that could be done. I think probably one of the bummers we see is where money is invested in things like I don't know, thinning your canopy, which is sort of this old pruning practice that for a mature large canopy tree, this is not necessarily a helpful thing. It would be better to do the structural pruning. You kind of get some thinning anyway, because the truth is trees are light eaters. So when you thin and you open up holes, it just fills the hole right back. So you
Mm,
unnecessarily stress the tree. You've wasted money. I mean, it's just not the way to go.
good point. Um, do people I'm gonna rephrase that. All right. So we've established that this is a time of year where it's smart to do some corrective action and maybe just to bolster the structural integrity of the tree.
Right.
And because it's deciduous, there is some low God, why am I struggling? And because in many cases, there's not as much requirement of the tree to do any work right now. So there's less stress when you're up there doing some work on it. Conversely, as I started this conversation, we're having snow and ice. And so somebody gets this heavy snowstorm or worse, an ice storm, and they look out the window and their beloved trees are at 90 degrees,
Yeah.
loaded with ice, and they're thinking they need to do something or they want to know what they can do or if they should do anything at all. What what does one how does one approach that site?
Um, unfortunately, this is one of those things that if you haven't gotten to it ahead of
Mhm.
time, there's not much you can do afterwards. And particularly if you have, say, a tree that's leaning, I would just, if there's now ice on it, you want to make sure that it doesn't start uplifting. You can always check that at the other side of the tree. So if it's leaning to the left, go to the right side of the trunk, look at the base, see if any roots are protruding. I
Mhm.
suppose the one thing I would say is just if it's a high risk situation, make sure you don't get caught in a bad situation with you're under the tree when it falls. You should just
Mhm.
steer clear or stay out of that part of your house. But other than staying safe, there's nothing that can be done at that point. This is why it's good to think about tree pruning as sort of like mowing your lawn. It's a regimented practice that you
Yeah.
do every I don't know. In the case of a large mature tree, every 2 to 3 years should be sufficient. If you have the budget, do it every year. But every 2 to 3 years is a good rule of thumb.
Yep. And what about the inclination that naturally might happen when somebody walks out to that tree because it is loaded with ice and they think they can shake it loose, knock it off with a broom or a something? Is that generally a good practice or is that ill-advised?
I think if the tree's small enough, you
Yeah.
could certainly do that. Just don't get hurt. Industry publications, we get these accident briefs every month, and it's always half professionals, but then there's half people inadvertently finding themselves in dangerous situations, like working on a ladder. Don't put a ladder next to that icy tree and get up there and try to shake ice out. That you want to be on the ground and make sure nothing can fall on your head and hurt you.
Okay. Good advice. And I want to get into a little more of the DIY discussion and if one is inclined to be that person,
Yeah,
what sort of precautions should they be taking, such as equipment and so forth. But I don't want to get there quite yet. As far as seasonality, as I mentioned, we're in the winter time for sure. January. There are better times of the year to do pruning and cutting into trees and even shrubs. But talk about that as it relates to trees. Best time,
yeah.
worst time.
Okay, best time is winter, dormant season. Interestingly enough, worst time is spring. You might think summer, but it turns out spring is actually generally more harmful because rising sap.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Summer is not necessarily a bad time. It can be if conditions are droughty and there's been a lack of water, but assuming reasonable rainfall, reasonable conditions, it can be a great time because trees have developed sort of tough leaves that can, well, this is true in the South. Of course, this is not universally true, but all this to say, summer can be a good time. And then fall is also generally considered a reasonable time.
And as far as the spring with the rising sap, explain why that creates a potential problem.
Yeah, you think about something like a maple, which saps profusely. When you cut a branch off, the tree is still. I mean, it's. You can just think about this pump pushing nutrients and water up into the canopy to
Mhm.
help fuel all those leaves that are growing. It takes a lot of resources.
Yeah.
So if you cut a branch off during that time, all of a sudden it's just like it's spurting out those valuable resources, and it's
Yeah.
just not a great. It's just hard on the tree.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's bleeding. It's the
Yeah,
life support energy that it needs internally is
right.
escaping. And
Yeah.
okay, got it. All right.
And
Go ahead.
I was just gonna make sure, for the audience, this is to do with trees. Shrubs are gonna be a little different, of course, but we're talking about large canopy trees right now, and
Right.
that's generally a good rule of thumb.
Okay. Um, I've got some notes to myself to ask you a few things. So let me just pause for a second and catch up. Okay. All right. So let's go into that DIYer out there. And I mean, there's some very reasonable things that they can be doing themselves to care for their trees. What would be sort of a scenario where you're very comfortable with someone going out and doing something where they're hopefully not going to hurt the tree or themselves?
I love it when folks are interested in doing this with young and new trees. So maybe there's a tree you planted in your yard in the last year or couple of years. Absolutely one that you could work on. And essentially, what you would do is you would go to that tree and you'd attempt to find, okay, what appears to be my biggest and straightest trunk, going basically from the base of the tree all the way to the tippy top of the canopy. And once you've evaluated what you think that main trunk probably is or probably should be, your second step is to say, okay, now what is competing for dominance with that main line that I've just identified? So maybe there's like a really obvious second trunk, or maybe there's a less obvious side branch, but it's getting really tall and maybe surpassing the trunk. With all of those, you would either fully remove the branch or competing trunk, or perhaps reduce it in half back to a side branch. And what we're doing with that is we're telling the tree or we're encouraging the tree to develop this path that we've identified as the main trunk and subordinating these other branches and trunks that are attempting to compete.
Mhm. And how tall of a where's the cutoff point? Not that's not a good term because that literally could be cutting. But what I'm trying to say is, where do you draw the line when that is probably a tree that's too large for a homeowner to make that determination and do that work?
I think it just had to do maybe I think I would draw the line at having to work on a ladder is like the safety
Mhm.
line that I would not cross.
Mhm.
But you could handle a tree with simple felcos and loppers up to say 10 or a 12-foot height.
Hmm.
That could be a stopping point. Or for the homeowner who might want to go a bit longer, then you could invest in some pole tools
Yeah.
and keep doing that up to say 20 or even 25 feet perhaps.
Wow.
At that point, I would definitely wear a hard hat and definitely wear eye protection because you just
Oh,
don't want a thing to fall and hit you right at the end of the branch in the side of your head. That could be bad. Um, but at the point at where you've got to now work off a ladder or anything other than a flat surface that is the ground, I just would not. It just requires professional training.
yeah. I feel a little guilty here because I am a DIYer when it comes to my pruning and tree care, and I I get up in the tree, I get on ladders too much, and I get up in the trees too much, and I know better, and I'm pressing my luck. I realize that, and Basil, I'm not kidding when I say there have been times where I've been up in the tree, and I think this may be the last time I'm. I mean, I may not make it down, the way I want to go.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, and I realize that's very ill advised, and I hope
If
to
you
heed my own advice.
if you do that, then I would recommend at least throwing a rope up in a branch and tying it around your waist and legs so that if you did fall, you'd have something to catch you, or throw a rope around the tree trunk, something just that
Yeah,
if you fall, you've got some little backup plan.
yeah, very good. And I'm glad you mentioned the other simple precautions we can take safety wise, such as the hard hat and the glasses. And I'll tell you what, I as a pruner who is always reaching in on shrubs, especially, and you're bending over and you're clipping down towards wherever it is near the ground, and when your body is moving in that direction so that you can get your pruners down low, oftentimes there's another branch or a
Yep.
stem or something sharp that I've been poked in the eye before, and it's not uncommon I'm sure you have many stories like that, but I did a podcast recently with a ophthalmologist who reached out to me because she heard a podcast I did on garden safety mentioning that I got poked in the eye, and she told me about all the eye injuries she treats from gardeners and DIYers in that very same scenario and others that are even worse. So the safety glasses, she said, it's a must. It's a non-negotiable. Even when you don't think going to do a job in your mind, you don't think you need them, you should still wear them. And because of that conversation, I routinely have them on my eyes when I go out.
Yeah. I mean, in the scenarios that we're talking about, I'm actually more worried about my eyes than my head. If I had
Mm,
to choose just one, I'm with you because those little
yeah,
eye pokes are really painful. That's a thing we're very careful about.
right. Okay. Good. All right, here's a question for you, and I think we touched on this in our prior conversation because it's a pet peeve of mine that's I don't feel like we can talk enough about as far as the educational best practices of it from a professional point of view, and that is tree topping is the term, and I'll bet I don't know I seem to recall you say you don't get that much of it in Raleigh anymore, but I wonder what the arborist does that realizes that's not the best thing for that tree's health when they're being asked to do it. And I know this probably happened to you. And when it does, how do you address that with a homeowner who wants that to be done? And when I talk about tree topping, if you'll answer that in the context of just describing what I mean by that as you get into the answer, that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Topping is where that we're getting large canopy trees we're talking about here. You just cut the top of a tree off or a very large, maybe it has three trunks. One of the trunks, you cut the top off. It's very harmful to the tree. They struggle to recover. You also see sort of another form of topping, which, imagine a big oak and it has all these large branches spreading out. And then they go and they cut every single branch in half, and it kinda looks like this they've attempted to make like an ornamental shrub or something. That would be another form of
Mm-hmm.
topping.
Mm-hmm.
And the tree, its only reaction is really just to sprout a bunch of new growth there if it can. Sometimes it
Yeah.
dies outright and cannot recover. If you're
Right.
lucky, it'll sprout. And if those sprouts grow and the tree's able to recover, then you end up in this situation where it is very dangerous because these sprouts are weakly attached. The larger they get, the larger they're likely to fall. So you're just creating this growing hazard. It
Yeah.
really doesn't lead to any good outcome. It's a poor investment and it's going to kill the tree or best case scenario, severely maim the tree.
Yeah, I'd almost call it a waste of money. You said poor investment, which is a nicer way of saying it, but at least with an
Yes,
investment, you hope that you get some return on your
that's true.
money.
This is an anti-investment. Actually, yeah, it's paying to harm your future self.
There we go. High five across the virtual screen there. Yes, agreed. Okay. Good to hear you. Good to hear from you on that point. And we'll move on because I don't miss an opportunity to talk about that because I just
Yeah,
feel like too many people don't realize the
still,
consequences.
it's still a thing. You just wouldn't think it, but it is still a thing.
It is. All right. One thing, a thing that you and I both have a love for is arborist wood chips.
Yes.
And I I feel like a kid in a candy store when I have a, you know, 10 or 20 cubic yards dumped in my by my street where I can go get my tractor and scoop it up and then spread it. I've got lots of places to spread it. I've been doing that a lot this year. I have in the past. I've always been a big fan. But talk to me about the virtues of arborist wood chips and the benefit that it has to improving the soil around the tree and all of the good that it does on top of the benefit that we typically can get that for free or maybe 20 bucks through chip drop or something like that.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm like you, I have this just odd treat where a pile of good rotting leaves or wood chips makes
Yeah.
me unnecessarily excited.
Yep.
Um, but a wood chip pile especially is an amazing thing. And I love wood chips because they are, especially if they're coming from branches, they're loaded with great nutrients. Branches are where you're going to find most of the good stuff. So the perfect load of wood chips would actually be one that was just of pruning debris and
Mm,
not trunk wood, but even trunk wood is fine. Doesn't really matter.
yeah.
Uh, and once you get it on the ground and it starts rotting, it's building healthy soil. It doesn't become waterproof. There's this fancy term for that called hydrophobia. So your triple shredded and your double shredded mulches often become hydrophobic. And again, we now have this thing we've paid for that's actually harming the thing we care about because the tree's not getting water.
Mm,
So with arborist wood chips, you don't have to worry about the hydrophobia. Um, they also get these nice fungal mats that develop and they hold the wood chips in
mhm,
place beautifully while also
mm.
being porous. I find that wood chips, particularly the chipped branch ends, have this incredible staying power, more so than almost any other product I've used. Um, I could probably go on for like a whole presentation about this, but that's sort of like the short of it. And they're free.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a separate podcast on that because I love talking about wood chips. When you mentioned hydrophobia and you referred to triple shredded, so that's a purchased product
Yeah.
and it's finely ground. And is
Yep.
that the reason why it becomes hydrophobic? Is because
Yeah.
it's tightly intertwined with the other
Yeah,
pieces?
different profile. Also, that
Hmm.
tends to attract the artillery fungus. Sometimes also you'll see the bird's
Ooh,
nest.
yeah.
They look very similar and operate very similarly. So that's not good either. Wood chips, I've seen it develop. I've seen it develop, but it's very rare. Whereas it's very common on a triple shred.
Yeah. And
Those are those
something,
little, those are those little black specks that shoot on your car and your house that everybody
no,
hates.
absolutely they are. Yes. And one thing I feel compelled to just mention when we are talking about the subject is I often get people asking me about, well, when you're putting those arborist wood chips on the surface of your soil, I mean, that's robbing the nitrogen from the plants around it. And the fact of the matter is that is not true when it's as a mulch. When it's
Yeah.
above the surface, it's breaking down. And if it's depleting any nitrogen whatsoever in the soil, it's only the top 16th of an inch according to university studies.
Yep.
So it's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue. Totally.
Okay.
If we were chatting with the tree on this podcast, I would venture to say the tree would tell you his three favorite foods are the arborist wood chips, and then leaves, and then compost. These are the best ways to make your trees super healthy.
I must have been a tree in a prior life. Those are my three favorite things. Can I tell you a quick leaf story real quick though, related
Please.
because we're talking about this now. And you're well aware of the very popular term "leave the leaves," and it's
Yep.
become more popular than ever, and for good reason. And I've struggled with it because I'm a big leaf collector and I love shredded mulch. It's my favorite type of mulch to use, especially in a vegetable garden where you want something that looks good and isn't clunky or chunky. And so I've been a big collector of it in subdivisions around here where they're bagged up and set at the curb for the trash companies to pick up and take to the landfill. And so my role is to come and intercept the bags, bring them home. I dump out a lot of them intact into my landscape beds. I don't
Yeah.
shred them or anything. And I just take maybe 20% and shred them. And that's my way to not feel guilty that I'm really, destroying all the whole leaves. Plus,
Yeah.
they're not going to landfill. But anyway, my
Yes.
point is, so this year I I was trying to even raise the bar on my own stewardship of how I manage leaves, because I very much believe in that concept. So I ended up not collecting any leaves this year at all. Not, and for the ones that drop on my property, I just leave them where they fall. But consequently, I didn't have any leaves to work with for next spring that I usually would have a
Right.
stockpile full of. And I've told the story on a podcast recently because it just happened not too long ago, but I'm going to tell it again. And y'all can fast forward through this next 2 minutes, but you will appreciate this because you love leaf mulch too. I was running an errand near my house, and I was getting in my car and I saw a truck pulling off with a big tractor, a big trailer behind it, and a sign that said leaf collection service on it. And I thought, oh my gosh, that guy's going around with his crew because he was probably a landscaper that in the fall, his main job is probably sucking up his clients' leaves, and
Yeah.
it shreds it through the vacuum that pulls up the leaves, and they're all shredded in this big trailer behind his truck. And I'm thinking, what's he do with those? What's he going to do with those leaves? So I'm trying to race him down to catch up to him to read the phone number on the sign. And I could never do it. I thought I had captured the number because I didn't have a pen or anything with me. But when I got home and called the number, it was not the right number because that number was out of service. I thought I lost my opportunity. I was really bummed about it because I said, that was it. That's exactly
Well,
what I needed. But 3 days later, I got a text from a guy named Adam, who was a friend of mine who had been dropping off whole leaves for the past 2 years at my house, one load in my driveway because he would rake them up with his crew. Well, that was the guy. He had upped his game and he had bought a
oh,
big leaf
nice.
vacuum, started his leaf collection service, and he was the one I was trying to track
Wow.
down. And I didn't know it until he pulled into my driveway with that truck in that
That's
trailer.
hilarious. Oh
And
my
so he
goodness.
he and a colleague of his who's up the road, I now have literally about at least 10 years of shredded leaves on my property that I have access to that I can tap into now and spread all through my property.
Oh
And
wow.
all I did was intercept it from going to the landfill. So I
That's
feel good about it.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And you actually raised sort of an interesting point worth noting, and that is most landscapers will give you their leaves. They don't want to have to pay to dump them.
Right.
And then like here in Raleigh, we have our city collective leaf collection service, and
Yeah.
they take them to this big stockpile and they just rot. You can
Yeah.
go get those rotted leaves for free or very cheap if your city has a leaf
hmm
collection service.
And I did that when I lived in North Carolina for a few years. And it was 100% of the soil I used in my vegetable garden that I
Oh, cool.
started that year. And I got to tell you, it was one of the best productive years I've ever had. And it was just the composted down soil like
Yeah,
leaves. Amazing. So I
it's
got us off
wild.
track, and I'm sorry about that, but it's
No,
all related because it's ultimately improving the soil.
right,
And it's coming from the trees, just like the
right.
wood chips or the leaves. So it is related.
Yeah, if you think about it, if you were walking in the forest, 10 million years ago, there's nobody out there mulching the trees or tending to them. They were feeding themselves, and it was from those fallen leaves, and it was from the falling branches and the falling trees, and it rots and it feeds the soil, and the soil takes care of the tree.
That's right. Okay, I have one more question for you though on the arborist wood chips.
Yeah,
If you're taking down a tree that's either diseased or it died because of insect pest issues,
yeah.
and somebody's wondering if they can use that safely as arborist wood chips around their other trees or garden, what do you say to that?
Um, let's put invasive pests to the side for a second.
Okay.
For most normal, naturally occurring diseases in our areas, it's just not going to be a problem because most diseases are in the air. A rust spore can
Right.
float for many miles. So your best bet is to boost its immune system. Let's call it that. It doesn't really
Mm,
have one, but it's the same concept. If you can keep it really healthy with these leaves and wood chips, etc., it's going to be able to resist those pests. So I just really don't worry about any possible harm that could come. I think is far outweighed by the health that comes into the soil from these products.
Hmm.
But let's talk about invasive pests for a second. If for example, I remember when emerald ash borer first came to North Carolina, you were not allowed to transport any ash across county lines, and
Ooh.
all ash wood chips needed to be quarantined. So there might be special bulletins in your area for certain pests. I would imagine most states have cooperative services, the extension agents, and those are the departments and the services that will be able to provide you with any invasive pest bulletins that might be around for your area.
Okay. And then if you or as a professional company, if you're taking down a tree that's been killed by or is infected by an invasive insect pest, um, where do your wood chips go?
Well, in those early days, we actually had to take them specifically, those had to go to a landfill.
Hmm.
But now emerald ash borer is so prevalent that there's no bans anymore.
Wow.
Um, and if the ash trees have been attacked at this point, it's a foregone conclusion. So we don't really worry about it anymore. I know the yeah, anyway, to answer your question, in the early days, those wood chips had to go to the landfill. Again, these are mandates from the county and the state levels.
Okay.
But these are just generally not the norm. I think probably most states are dealing with one or two invasive pests that are
Right.
a real issue, and you probably know about them already. Yeah, I want to add just a few ending ideas to the structural pruning and the soil. So, one really easy framework for folks to think about this is structure is strength and soil is health.
Hmm.
And if we're talking about just sort of this meta level tree care, I would say there's just those 2 and one other thing to consider, which is do not create damage in the root zone. So if you can provide your tree with ideal strength through structural pruning, ideal health by focusing on these things we've been talking about, and avoid doing trenching through the root zone or excavating a section out to build an addition to your house. If you can do those 3 things, your tree is going to live for a very long time.
Hmm. Thank you for saying that. I think the root thing is one that we don't think enough about because there are jobs around our landscape a lot of times where the people come in and they're taking that trencher or whatever that is, that just cutting across the property, and there's no doubt that it's cutting right through some of the primary roots.
Right.
And nobody thinks to say, "Hey, is there a way that we can kind of go wider or something?"
Yes. It's one of those heartbreaking situations that happens far too often, which is
Yeah.
a client called us about a tree they just absolutely love, but we are on the tail end of some project. Maybe there was a bit of kitchen added, or they put some irrigation pipes down with a trencher,
Yes.
and nothing can be done now. But if we could have just been there before construction to look at the plans, there's often very easy ways to avoid this what becomes critical harm to the tree. Sometimes, I'm thinking about this one job. We might have talked about this last time, but it was a job site where the neighbor had sidewalled a whole row of beautiful trees and lowered the grade so that they could build this retaining wall. Well, those trees had lost essentially half their root zone.
Yep.
Not we didn't This was very, very dangerous situation because the trees could actually fall at any given point in time. So we just want to be really delicate with the root zone and call a trained professional in advance. They should have at least an ISA certified arborist credential. But I mean, I'd love to see real world experience and maybe even additional credentials on top of that.
I want to speak to both of those points. Second is the ISA credentials and why that's essential in my opinion, for those of us who are seeking quote professional help, to really hire a professional and not somebody with a pickup truck and a chainsaw that says they're that you. Well, I guess I'm making this the first part of the conversation, but an ISA professional is going to have a certification, a true identification number that's going to be associated with their professional credentials, right?
Right. Yep. And you can verify it online.
Yep.
Um, I will say though, an ISA certified arborist is not what it used to be.
Oh,
It is good, but I would recommend going beyond it if you can. Test them a little bit on their knowledge. The only reason I say this is because The system's being gamed a little bit. People work real hard to get that credential, but they won't
Yeah.
do any learning beyond that, and then they'll just forget what they learned. So I would prod them a little bit and maybe read through the website. I actually, particularly with pruning, in my book, I give this page dedicated to ways that you can actually find a great professional in your area to prune your trees. I give the reader 4 or 5 things they should ask the representative.
And your book is called From Wasteland to Wonder. How does somebody get that book?
They can get a free ebook online or order the hard copy, which we're selling at cost.
Yeah.
I do recommend the hard copy just because it's nice to be able to hold that in your hands, especially if you're working outside.
I have it. It's an amazing hard copy book to have and hold in your hands and refer to. And then you have all these QR codes throughout the book that takes you deeper into all of those subject matters. You did a phenomenal job. And the fact that you're giving that away for free, other than the cost of postage,
Yeah,
is very generous. So on behalf of everybody, thank you for your generosity there. And the
absolutely.
book really is, you thought of everything. It's an amazing book. As an author of 3, you did an amazing job with that. So good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But on the issue with the certified arborist, as you said, the thing, they're kind of gaming the system now. But my impression was always that, they weren't in the business to cut down your tree. They were in the business to save your tree or make some professional cuts on it. But taking it down was not the first option. Is that
That's that's
was that accurate?
it was the idea behind it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I don't want us to go. I'm
Yeah.
happy to go deep in this if you want to, but the short of it is, our industry is a tree removal industry. We earn most of our revenue from removals, and this includes everybody, including the
Yeah.
really big boys. And I know this from firsthand experience. I've been in this industry for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. And back to that thing about the retaining wall and the changing the grade next to those beautiful big trees.
Yeah.
I drive by 3 massive oak trees near the road of a property that they just built a house on, and they decided to change the grade. And so the part between the oak trees and the tree, they took a whatever it is that basically wipes out the grade, and it was Basil, it was within just a few feet of the trunk of the tree. And
Mm.
then they just kind of made it look as though they didn't cut it all. They just filled it or graded or whatever. But anyway, the bottom line is those roots that were supporting the tree and bringing in the water and nutrients from that side of the tree have been completely severed and removed.
Yeah.
And although it's wintertime now and the structures of the massive trees is beautiful, I'm watching it closely because I predict the demise of all 3 of those trees.
Yeah, it's interesting. This brings me to a little bit of nuance that your listeners might appreciate. So, sort of as a rule of thumb, if you can, if not dig in the area under the branches, it's probably that's a good rule of thumb. Your tree's probably going to be okay.
Mhm.
Now, if you do start digging or trenching or excavating in that area, you risk harming its health. If you get too close to the trunk, though, you actually risk the structural stability, which is much scarier. And sort of a good rule of thumb we'll use for that is 6 times the diameter of the trunk. And at the 6 times the diameter of the trunk is where you sort of cross over from harming its health to possibly undermining its ability to stand up straight.
Mm. And when you talk about harming its health, from minimal harm to what's the worst case scenario under the category of harming its health?
Yeah, good question. Often we'll see a trenching line through this rooting zone where it does harm the health, but we're able to turn things around because we can improve the soil by aerating it with our air tools and incorporating great compost in. So we have a good wide range of being able to fix the health issue. There does come a point though where if you've cut too much and maybe conditions were real droughty or soil was very poor because it was, I don't know, like a neighborhood with red clay. You could just tip that scales enough so that you kill your tree. We see it all the time, and particularly here this last summer, we had 25 days with no rain, And I think there were 12 record-setting heat days during that span. And I'll tell you, I've never seen so many mature oaks die in this area. Hypoxylon
Mm.
canker was out in force, and it was just everywhere we were looking, oaks were dying.
Oh.
And this is exactly the scenario where if you've harmed the root zone, your tree just might succumb.
Well, on that happy note, well, there's an option for recovery. So we want to be careful there.
Yeah, and of course, with all things, the best is to be proactive. So if you start feeding that soil now, all the ways we've talked about, I mean, by the time these sorts of things happen, your tree's going to have a lot more resilience to withstand that. And then same with structural pruning. When the time comes, a big storm hits, ice happens, your tree is going to be the strong one.
Preventative maintenance,
There
being
you go.
proactive. There,
Yep.
there you go. Excellent, excellent information as always. Thank you, Basil, for this and for everything. Now, just last question, and I'm going to let you go. You have this nonprofit, which I love it. I wish it were. I mean, we can all participate inward and help you, which is great. But what you're doing is so great for your local community. Tell us about Project Pando.
Yes. Our nonprofit is so much fun. We get to do all the things we really want to do where we don't have to answer to market demand. So we just do zany and weird things. But this particular project, we work with the community to collect native seeds, and then we grow those into young saplings that we give away. So we're generating, I don't know, 8 to 12,000 trees a year that we're giving to the community, all from seeds that are from trees here in this
Yeah,
area. So it's
yeah,
almost a hyper native tree. And one of the best parts about this is we've had so much community engagement. People, it's just such a cool gateway into this
yeah.
world. It's maybe you get a chance to go collect seeds with your kids, and the act of collecting those seeds draws you into then helping raise the trees, and the next thing you know, you're planting trees in your front yard. So it's just really, it's fun to be a part of, and it's fun to watch.
And the other thing is those saplings, though, when the community gets to come and take those and plant them, they respond quickly.
Oh yeah.
They're not a lot of transplant shock, and they are raring to go as far as the
Yes.
growth.
You talk about a whole nother hour-long discussion. Saplings are so underrated. They're
Yes.
the basis for doing pocket forests and thickets. Like, it's just, I am I get as excited about a sapling as I do about a pile of wood chips. It's just really one of my favorite things.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, okay. I've got a note for 2 more podcasts about conversations with you.
Well,
And
where we're going next with Panda, I'll just mention it to you because we just got a
yes.
big grant from the Giving Grove out of Kansas City. It's a great
Ooh,
organization, but we got a big grant to begin planting community orchards. So we are next sort of our like project number 2, and we're not sure how to like. Well, I guess we got to find some fancy names, but this will be sort of a food-based situation where we're planting orchards in the community and engaging local community members to help raise the trees and care for them. It's going to be fun, and people get excited about food too.
yeah. No, I love it. So, all the credit to you guys for your hard work and your generosity. And we'll have a couple more conversations at least because you've named two more topics that we can spend some time with, and I would love it.
Well, that would be awesome because I always love chatting with you, Joe. I appreciate you having me.
You're welcome, Basil, and thank you for being here. And I wish you all the best, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you saw last week's episode, you know why we had back to back encore episodes with Basil. And be sure to check out the notes below this video for any relevant information and links. And if you like this format here on YouTube, we will be adding all future episodes to this channel, and we will continue to post them as audio only on all our main podcast players. And while you're here on YouTube, I just wanted to mention that our other channel, GGW TV, that channel hosts all 12 seasons from the episodes of my organic gardening television show, Growing a Greener World. And I'm talking full-length television episodes that we've uploaded all to that YouTube channel so you can access them anytime, anywhere. And if you like this channel or both, please consider subscribing. And if you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear from you. Shout outs to Amy Prentice, Brendan O'Reilly, and Christine LaFon for their work on this podcast this week and every week. And I'll see you again next week right back here. Take care, and thanks for watching.